Hi guys, welcome back to the Revive Stronger podcast. I'm your host as always, Steve Hall, and today I have Joe Jeffries back on the show. If you don't know Joe, he is part owner of the Physique Collective, which is a group that is really enhancing the knowledge behind performance enhancing drugs, allowing people to do it in a safe, free manner. As you guys know, the Revive Stronger podcast promotes drug-free bodybuilding, natural bodybuilding, but people like Joe are doing a great job on educating people if they are to go down that route. What can they expect? What are the negatives also that a lot of people gloss over? And he also informs people of how to do it the safest way possible. So I see him as a great person to involve with the podcast, to help promote further, to educate the wider masses for those reasons, for the negatives, which we definitely touch on today, but also how to do it safely. And Joe himself is a great arbiter of that. He has his own experiences. He's very open and honest about sharing those. And he has also helped tons of people, the likes of Jared Feather and also Mike Israetel, who you guys probably know. He has helped them do their enhancements in the best way possible. So he is very knowledgeable on this fact. And that is why I wanted to touch on this subject with him. It's basically a podcast dedicated to Natty or not, because I think he has insights into that world that a lot of us wouldn't. So I thought he's the best person to ask about, okay, how can we actually identify such people? What should we look out for? Is there any chance that we could be wrong or right? Like, what are the likelihoods here? And then we obviously talk about, if you are going down that route, what are the downsides? What do people not talk about? And I think this is just a really fruitful discussion with lots of powerful take-homes. So definitely enjoy it. This podcast is brought to you by MacroFactor, the smartest nutrition app on the market. Think of it like MyFitnessPal, but supercharged. It outperforms it in every single way. You just enter your details and goals, log your food, and wait. From there, MacroFactor fine-tunes your plan automatically, giving your body exactly what it needs to stay on track and reach your goals, without the guesswork. If you find tracking apps to be stressful or feel like they're judging you for not being perfect, then you'll love MacroFactor. No punishment for imperfection. The app will adapt to your habits and help you better understand your body to move towards your goals at your own pace. So ditch the outdated apps and get with the times. Download MacroFactor today and use my code STRONGER to get 2 weeks completely free via the App Store or Google Play, or find it linked in the description below. Now with that said, let's get into today's show. Joe, you have coached hundreds of enhanced athletes at this point, and you speak openly about performance-enhancing drugs. Fake naturals is a hot topic, and I don't think it will ever die within the fitness industry. Why do you think it creates such friction within the industry? Does anything come to mind to why you think it's such a diversive topic?
It's interesting, Steve. This is the first time of hundreds of podcasts that I've done over the years that anybody's asked me about the Natty or not stuff. So I've been caught a little off guard here. So I haven't had time to think about this. So we'll let flow whatever comes to mind. So why do I think it's a hot topic? I think because there's some genuine moral good in there from a segment of those people. I think nobody likes a liar. I don't think anybody would consider it morally viable to lie, to raise your own profile or to garner business or something like that. The business side of things, we know. It's funny, I did a series of stories, I don't know if you saw them yesterday, about like when I started coaching. There was a picture of me and Dorian when I was like 17 and shit like that.
Did see them,
you know, and
it's a great if anyone had, well, no, there'll be a bunch of people that didn't see it, but a lot of people only see you at the top. They don't see the kind of almost why have I forgotten what they're called, the iceberg, with all of the groundwork you did beforehand. So yeah, but
my point there being is bodybuilding was a really different place like 16 years ago. There wasn't this natty or not discussion, and social media wasn't a thing. So I think social media is the propellant. I'm sure that there's definitely professionals. There's Dennis Wolf on camera saying that he doesn't ever take anabolics, and he was competing in the Olympia. But I think it's more of a hot topic now because the space is so saturated and there's so much money going through the industry and supplement companies and whatnot that it's become, on the one side, something, like I said, I think is morally good. On the other side is another way for people to generate revenue through the accusation side of things. So it's a strange paradox in that sense.
Yeah, it's a weird one. I immediately, when I think about this subject, I think about Liver King, because he was recently, like over the last years, outed, and he obviously was espousing 100% natural, and he was off the back of that selling protocols, supplements, and all of this. So I definitely agree in that sort of sense. Amazing that he was outed. And interesting, there's people that obviously were supplying him and kind of keeping that under wraps for him. So it's such a, like, what's it called? Like Charlotte's Web, the web we weave. Like it's suddenly going to fall down at some point, and it absolutely did and collapsed for him. So I just think the amount of stress that someone like that must be under, thinking, oh, at any point someone could out me, is just kind of wild. And the reason I wanted to talk to you specifically about this, Joe, is like I said, you're well in that enhanced space. So I imagine if anyone has a good eye, if there could be an eye for Natty or not, it would be yourself.
Maybe. What I will say, actually, I saw it's quite timely. I saw PCA post today another failed drug test from somebody that had won one of the natural classes, and I looked on his Instagram. He said 28 times natural champion. So this is just, it's real poor behavior. And he got popped for Clen, so clenbuterol, which is a beta-2 adrenergic agonist. Sorry. I've got an ebook on Clen if anybody wants to know how to use it. And some diuretics as well. I think diazide was on there. So he wasn't using any anabolic androgenic steroids, but he was certainly using performance-enhancing drugs that would give lipolytic benefits and anti-catabolic benefits, and of course diuresis benefits. People are willing to do that at a natural show and go and get tested for it. It's funny because these are drugs that have relatively short half-lives, you know, especially the diuretics. So he surely wouldn't have even tried to hide the fact that he was using those. He would have used those within hours of the drug test, you know. Another thing I can say,
Boggles.
Over the years, I know it's the case with me. I know it's the case with other coaches like Tom Hames, like Cal Raystrick, because we've spoken about these before. We've had plentiful inquiries for consultations from people asking us to help them pass a drug test. So it happens. I've never done it. Ethically, because I don't like it. Secondly, I don't know how to get someone to pass a drug test. You know, I just know how to use the drugs.
I imagine it could be quite a profitable business for you, like doing that.
I know people that do it. I think I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think Broderick has offered that as a service before.
I have a feeling I've heard him speak somewhere saying that's. I mean, he's pretty laissez-faire about drug use in general. So, I kind of understand it's more of the morals and ethics. Yes, it is upon Broderick to some extent, but it's the individual at the end of the day that's really the person that's screwing around. And I can't understand it at all. Like my brain, I'm just like, if you're on gear, just compete against guys on gear. It's just a plastic trophy at the end of the day most of the time. But for these people, clearly there's more to it.
Yeah, I think the competitive side is probably the less of our worries, especially considering, unfortunately, for people like me and you that love competitive bodybuilding, the popularity thereof has been dive bombing over the past couple of years, especially. So, you know, it's not nice to see that, but I think the bigger problem is probably Instagram personalities selling training programs or nutrition programs or supplements based on a physique. And what you will see is, although competitive bodybuilding has taken a downturn, the kind of body composition side of things has rocketed with the help of things like TikTok and whatnot. And now you have a huge crop of maybe 15 to 19-year-olds that won't know what an enhanced physique looks like a really obvious enhanced physique. I remember when I was 15, I printed out Frank McGrath's training routine on A4 paper. I don't know if you remember Frank McGrath, the old Animal Pack athlete. I had a poster of him in my room. And because I idolized him, and I remember thinking, maybe I was just a particularly low IQ 15-year-old, but I remember thinking, right, if I do this training, I'll look like him eventually, if I stick to it for long enough. I'm lucky that Instagram didn't exist, because if it was by my 12-week transformation program, buy my nutrition plan or whatever, I'd have done that. And that is what kids are doing now. And I think there's a greater kind of psychological burden to it as well, because people will invest so much time and money plowing towards something as a quote unquote natural, and they'll never get there. They won't even get close in some cases. And I think the psychological toll that will take could be quite large.
And you talking about someone who maybe has been competing for 10, 15 years, or just bodybuilding in general, naturally putting a lot of time and effort into it, but not seeing the result of someone that they like, I don't know, a genetic outlier that's like a top pro natural athlete.
Yeah. Or somebody that's maybe lightly enhanced, you know?
Sure.
You know, that, and look, there's such a great disparity in genetics in this game, and biological individuality is so large. So you're never going to be able to look like somebody else anyway. It's like me back in my day. I haven't taken above replacement doses of androgens for a very long time, 2+ years. I took plentiful back in the day. And I've had consults this year with top 5 Olympians that are on less than 1,000 milligrams at the peak, and a lot of people doing 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. They'll never look like that. So there's that disparity within the enhanced realm. I think in the natural realm, if you're comparing average, I hate to say average Joe, but you know what I mean, average middle ground responder here to fake Natty, that disparity is unbelievably large.
And I can totally see that it kind of has a toll on people, especially, and you mentioned social media, it plays such a huge, like people spend more time on their phone on social media, and that becomes their environment more than their local gym. Like their local gym, they probably don't see these crazy physiques, but when they go on social media, they do, and immediately they're kind of questioning, like, oh, maybe I should hop on, or they then think anyone with a more impressive physique than they have is on gear, and that kind of short-term wanting the result yesterday type of mindset. And I guess also, you know better than I do, but I'm assuming anabolic steroids are becoming easier to get hold of. More people seem, at least reported in the news, more people are using than ever. It's not something I have any insight on.
They're definitely not hard to get hold of, apart from we've got a shortage of Masteron and Primobolan currently.
Right.
That's causing a little bit of a problem. But, if you wanted to use testosterone, or Anavar and growth hormone or insulin or whatever, it's as easy as send one WhatsApp now and the package is at your door tomorrow morning, no problemo. Especially in, in the UK where, it's legal. I've got, whatever on my desk here, and it's completely legal. It's no problem. It's very affordable, so it's so accessible. Yeah, easy peasy.
Which I guess many years ago it wasn't, so it's kind of more people are going that way. But it's like you mentioned, this guy, I actually don't know, haven't seen his physique, but I saw someone, Joshua, who's a judge at the WNBF. He competed against this individual who got tested and got caught, and the guy did a BNBF show and didn't even place in like the top 5.
Oh, sure.
So it's like he didn't even get in first call out. Since I don't know when he started using or anything like that, but the fact that I always find it funny when people put like the number of wins they've got in their profile, like do you, but clearly if he's putting that number in, it's like, and you look at the physique, you're like, well, you've won that many, but your physique, it's not bad, but it wasn't like standout. I mean, again, he's not placing in a top 5 at some kind of regional qualifier for the BNBF. So it's kind of like you're just doing it for the glory of the number and that sort of thing. And I think it's a bit short-term mindset, but maybe he was just like, now it's getting more competitive. To be that competitive, I have to take something. And do you think many people get into the mindset of everyone's just using? Anyone who looks that good must be on something?
Yeah. 100%. I've heard people say that plenty of times. I haven't got too much experience in the natural bodybuilding realm. I've always coached enhanced guys. I've had a few natural bodybuilders that I've coached to stage, but few and far between as compared to like hundreds of enhanced individuals. But that is but that exists in the PED world as well. When I'll have a consultation with somebody that's using like 3 grams, which for context is a lot, and they'll say, yeah, but everyone's doing this. You go, Yeah, people are, but not everybody. It's very difficult when it comes to discussions of dose, because it's very similar to training volume. The genetic variability in response is so unbelievably vast, and general recommendations for like total milligrams per week to be exposed to for X outcome is impossible. It's probably harder than training volume to like nail down. We know a few things, like there's a dose response relationship to a degree. It's like a sort of inverted U, but it would go like this, almost like a inverted J, I suppose, inverted J curve. So that's going to exist for everybody really. But the outcomes that they get are so varied. If you look at the famous basin studies, look at the statistical analysis, look at the plot graph of how much lean body mass is added. Now, lean body mass can be fluid as well, and nitrogen retention, glycogen retention, whatever. You look at this plot graph, and there's people that gain like kilos and kilos, and there's people that gain nothing from 600 milligrams, and that does genuinely happen. I've had clients like Leon comes to mind when I started coaching Leon Pierce. I don't know if you've seen Leon.
Probably have. I can't picture him right now.
One of the most genetically sublime bodybuilders I've ever had the pleasure of working with. He's funny because he got in touch with me years ago, and he said, like, I've decided to do bodybuilding, so I've bought these anabolics and I'm gonna start training. That was the and I was like, what are you talking about, man? But then he sent me the photos, and I was like, okay, maybe you're somebody where this would actually be worthwhile, because he looked like he'd been training for years. And literally like 250 milligram a week, which is quite a low dose first cycle. And I think he gained like 40 pounds of muscle in less than a year, and first competitive season, just like winning everything, On the other side of the coin, there's people that don't gain 40 pounds in their whole career.
Yeah. It's kind of wild. I think the key thing that you mentioned there is the genetics part. It's something that I think that's why there's so much confusion with this, because people, I don't know why within bodybuilding, I had the same thing. You mentioned kind of looking at, I forget his name, but the guy from Animal Pack, his program, and being like, if I do his training, I'm going to look like him. And I had the same, like, if I just work hard enough, I'm going to be as good as like a Phil Heath or a Ronnie Coleman. Like, it will just happen. I can look like even like a Steve Cook. Like, if I Steve Cook, maybe more attainable. Like, I'll be able to get a look like that. And it's just like, the longer you do it, the more you realize, why isn't this working? It's like you think you're doing something wrong, and it's not necessarily you're doing anything wrong. It's just you aren't them, and you haven't been putting in enough time. And so, like, then people get a bit lost. And I think then people assume, and maybe sometimes, I think the evidence-based space doesn't help this sometimes with anabolic use. There'll be studies, and you've probably heard these reference, where it's like guys who didn't train, who took gear, grew more muscle than individuals who like trained naturally. And they use that as like a case of just like how powerful anabolics could be. And I think then people just assume, hearing that, if I go on, like, anyone who's on gear, it's almost just the gear's doing like 80% of the work, right? But it's clearly not the case.
Yeah, there are there's some troubles with those studies, and a lot of people that are in the anabolic space would like to tell you that that's just nonsense, but it's not nonsense. There's definitely truth in that. If you look at what androgens do, they bind at the androgen receptor and they transcribe anabolism. So they turn on a lot of anabolic machinery, which ultimately leads to muscle protein synthesis going up via genomic effects. And some anabolics have some non-genomic effects that will make muscle protein breakdown come down. So if you consider the protein turnover equation, similar to your dietary protein intake will allow you to push up muscle protein synthesis to a degree, and your resistance training will push up muscle protein synthesis. Anabolics are doing the same thing, sans anything else. So yeah, you shift protein turnover to favor a lot more muscle protein synthesis, you're going to grow independent of a training stimulus. But as you know, there's a demand and adaptation cycle present with all hypertrophy. So yeah, can you have like novel stimulus of exposure to androgens? Yeah, but you can't just take anabolics forever. The demand is lacking, so, and just like we need to progressively overload our resistance training or our caloric intake in an off season, you do need to progressively overload your exposure to anabolics or growth hormone or whatever it may be that's impacting muscle protein synthesis.
You mentioned it before, and you kind of touched on it there in terms of like androgens, and people talk about some telltale signs are like cap delts or like big traps, because upper body contains more of those, and so those muscle groups seem to respond a bit more quickly. Are there any kind of physiological or visual giveaways, or I guess acne or something like that, that you think could be used to be of any help here to kind of tell if someone's on?
There is some truth in that. There's a greater density of androgen receptors in the traps and the lateral delts. So if an individual does have really pronounced lateral delts and traps, sure, it could be a sign that they've got a lot of androgen action in those body parts. Some people do just have fantastic lateral delts and traps though. So that could be the case. You know, it's also the fact that if you look at that on stage, if an individual is using, we'll say, a mechanical way to crank diuresis harder than you could ever physiologically do. So, you know, you can do all the, and I hate to say this, but you can do all the fluid and sodium manipulation in the world and take as much peak max as you like. You're not going to get drier than somebody that's using aldactone and diazide. You know, the counter-regulatory processes are just too potent. So if somebody's getting real dry, you know, eliminating every bit of extracellular fluid possible to that shrink wrap degree, yes, they are going to look drier. There's also something with regard to the androgen to estrogen ratio and what that does to fluid dynamics. So if your blood androgen level is high in ratio to your blood estrogen ratio, fluid dynamics, or we'll say fluid compartmentalization, tends to favor intracellular space. And if you haven't got any fat cell space available because you're so lean, you'll be able to bias a load of fluid retention intramuscularly. You can imagine how that looks to the kind of shape of your skeletal muscle tissue that will present in that manner. So yeah, there is some truth to that, the things that you can do with fluid balance and androgen receptor binding affinity in those regions and things. Acne, yeah, sure. So we know that acne is a result primarily of increased oxidative stress. There's lots of things that cause oxidative stress. Androgens, that's one of their primary, we'll say, like, pathologies of toxicity is oxidative stress. So people that do suffer with acne on androgens, it's normally an issue of inadequate antioxidant exposure. In fact, we've got a lot of information on Physique Collective on this, and my colleague Matt has an ebook on acne. Anybody that uses anabolics needs to really consider a much greater antioxidant intake than a natural athlete, both dietarily and supplementary. Gyno could be a telltale sign as well. So gyno meaning gynecomastia, which is the growth of glandular tissue at the breast. This is presented via an imbalance, again, of androgen to estrogen action at the nipple gland itself. If estrogen contribution is too high relevant to androgens, and this is genetically unique, then yes, there'll be glandular tissue growth. But again, you know, I used anabolics for about 10 years and I never got any gyno at all. I did get gyno when I was 14 and I've still got it, you know. But I'll say most of the pros that I work with have had their gyno cut out. Super, super common.
It's so interesting because I also had gyno. This was after my accident. I think you probably know this story, Joe, where I got hit by, and the listeners, some of them might not know, but I got hit by a van over a decade ago now, and bruised something in my brain, like the hypothalamus pituitary gland, and so I wasn't producing testosterone like I should. My estrogen went way high, so then I developed gyno, and that's how I found out about how many issues I had physiologically, and I went on a course of TRT to actually that rid me of the gyno, which is interesting because it's obviously just working on balances there. And obviously I'm off, and I've been off for over a decade now of taking TRT, but it's just interesting because I've experienced that. And I guess hair loss is also one, which, I mean, that's also genetically like predetermined again, for some people.
Hair loss is one. As you can see, I've got a full head of hair. It's funny because I shaved my hair for a long time, and I was out walking the dog about a year ago, and somebody said to me, "When did you lose your hair?" I said, "That's it now. I'm growing my hair back." But yeah, if you've got the MPB gene, then we know that androgens do increase miniaturization of hair follicles, as does scalp tension. as does oxidative stress, as does IGF-1, as does supraphysiological estradiol. So there's lots of things, but these can all be consequences of androgen use. But if you haven't got the MPB gene, like me, you're not going to lose any hair. So I never had any acne. I never lost any hair, and I never actually got any gyno. I was really, really lucky in the side effect side of things, and I didn't really play it safe. I did far more than I should have done, to be honest. So some people, I think the biggest telltale sign is going to be the degree of muscularity that they carry.
Yeah. I'm glad you walked through that and we had that back and forth, because it's just so clear how you cannot use those physiological like they're not giveaways. They are clues to some extent, because it's like you said, you didn't suffer from any of that. You might get some people that really do, and you might get people that suffer from some and not the others. Or I say suffer, I guess some of them are suffering, like acne, hair loss. They're not great, gyno, that sort of thing. And then obviously like delts, traps, but that could be just genetic proclivity there. So it's just a bit convoluted to try and use those for sure. And you mentioned level of muscularity. So obviously some people like to use the fat-free mass index of like a 25. And if you're above 25, based off this old data set that I think has been somewhat debunked. But how do you feel about using FFMI? Is that something you think is useful at all?
I think for a broad stroke, it is. But I've genuinely met people that exist quite far out of that range. Is it north of 25? We say it's very unlikely that they are natural.
Pretty much.
But I've met some crazy competitors in my time. I mean, like I mentioned Leon earlier, he's got a client at the minute. This kid, I wish I could remember his name, begins with a T. But if you look at his Instagram, all the comments, fake Natty, you know. But I know for a fact he is natural, you know. And I've met a lot of those guys in my time. So I think as a broad stroke, it probably works. But the problem is as well, there's people way below 25 FFMI that are using anabolics.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's not like you take it and suddenly you're 30 FFMI. So it's not going to be accurate. But, you know, if you're looking on like the pro stage, 99.9% of them are using anabolics. I think where it gets cloudy is Instagram. Not even to say about the things like Photoshop and AI that's going on with these people as well, you know?
Yeah, when I think about that, I think I've searched on Reddit before, like there's a Natty or Not forum, and I think I've actually been brought up there like a couple of times, and I find it hilarious, so I'm just like, man, you've just picked one random photo where maybe I look good, like, or people are like, oh look, there's gyno on, not that they've said it about me, but someone, it's just like the lighting just hit his nipple funny, like, just people are so eager to bring people down, I think, and make themselves feel better in that sense.
Yeah, it's a
strange
concept that people put so much time and energy into this thing. You know, for there to be a subreddit, I mean, Reddit is a crazy place, man. I've had to delete Reddit off of my phone. I think I've done that like 3 times, then re-downloaded it. I'm pretty sure that it's going to be the last time I delete it now. But it's an echo chamber of insanity. You know, like the nootropic subreddit, the whatever subreddit that, you know, even the PEDs. I was looking at the steroid subreddit the other day, and it's an echo chamber of craziness. And you think you're reading posts from, I don't want to say normal people, but, you know, rational individuals. But you're reading posts from the kind of person that would be sat on that subreddit writing paragraphs about Natty or Not, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, Reddit's not a great place for information. And I think that's mainly what Natty or Nots are, right? It's just entertainment. It's just like subjective for the most part. And the actual value, especially for a listener to this podcast or someone who follows you, Joe, like it's almost zero, apart from just, oh, that's interesting or whatever. It's just like, you can never know for sure. However, people do try and prove their natural status. So they try and use blood work. And then I know like a Greg Doucette will like take that and try and interpret it. How easy is it to use like a one-off blood test like that? Can you read someone's blood work like that and interpret it to the extent of being like sure someone's natural or not?
Well, as I say, I'm not like an expert on blood work for people trying to pass these tests, but So when you take anabolic androgenic steroids, your own endogenous LH and your own endogenous FSH, so luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, will go to zero, and you can't turn that back on. We can use like HCG, which is an LH mimetic, but that won't register as LH on blood work. So your LH will still be zero. You'll get a little bit of spillover to FSH. So you could increase FSH a bit. You can use recombinant, so like HMG, which is recombinant LH and recombinant FSH. These are drugs that people typically use in like fertility protocols. But again, that won't translate over to blood work. So I don't know how somebody using, so if you're using anabolics, your LH and FSH is going to be tanked. It's going to be zero, because you've got no endogenous sex steroid hormone production. Now, if you use them and then come off, eventually your own endogenous LH and FSH will turn back on, and you will have your own endogenous sex steroid hormone production. Eventually, that time varies for many people. Suffice to say, could somebody go on anabolics, come off, wait, and then get blood work? Yeah. That's and I mean, a telltale sign would be as well if they've got super physiological testosterone that's like way outside of the reference range. However, the reference range, even in my career, the reference range has shrunk down quite a bit. I'll still see genetic anomalies like you'll often see at the top of the reference range these days something like 800 nanograms per deciliter, which I think is around 30 nmol or something. I don't know what it is in nmol. But I'll regularly see people 1,100, 1,200 nanogram per deciliter. So they're off the reference range, but they're natural. They're just in the upper kind of 1%. But if someone's in the 3,000, 5,000, yes, impossible.
And you made a good point there, because again, this blood work, someone could be trying to pass, like they get the blood work, especially if they're sending it off to like a Greg Doucette for him to inspect it, you think they're going to try and somewhat cook the books, that's assuming they're not natural. And then it's also a case of, well, they could have used many years in the past, and they might be claiming like lifetime natural, or for certain federations there's a 10-year drug-free policy, or I think the IFBB for their natural shows it's like 3 years or something. So it's kind of then a question of, it's just, again, becomes so convoluted. The more we talk about it, the more I'm like these discussions just become so fruitless, because how would you ever know completely?
Yeah. There's some other drugs you can use that won't impact blood work as well. Like we mentioned the guy recently that got popped by PCA. Like you could use clenbuterol. I was about to say you could use your himbine, but that is natural, isn't it? GH is very easy to clear before you get to blood work. That could register as high serum GH or IGF-1. Insulin, many people aren't testing blood insulin, but even if they are, short active life, even the longest kind of basal insulin's like 24-hour active life. Get your blood work done the next day, you're fine. Things like metformin, telmisartan, that's not going to flag. Certain androgens, so depending on the blood test, like some anabolics like Masteron or Primobolan, they have a slight cross reactivity. Like there's no blood Masteron assay on blood work, or blood Primo, because these aren't bioidentical hormones. So if people are using these, it could register as like testosterone, but only about 50%. And again, if you're using like short esters like Masteron propionate or Primobolan acetate, they're very, very short esters. I'm looking at a bottle of Masteron propionate. If I pinned that whole bottle today and got my blood work next week, it wouldn't show anything on there.
What about urine? Is that different? Is that less accurate?
Or urinalysis can test for metabolites, which is going to be longer.
Cool. Yeah, because I think, well, at least in the natural side, they very rarely get blood work. It's virtually always just urine testing that they do. They might do off-season testing, and that might include some blood work. I'm not entirely certain. So that's there. And it's also interesting because, like our guy, we don't know the guy that got popped at the PCA and he competed at the BMBF. He didn't get tested at the BMBF, but he didn't place, and he wasn't competitive. So it's like, I don't know if he was using it at that point or not, but it's just interesting to even think about the fact that there could be people not even being competitive who are using things. It's kind of just like,
man. Definitely. It's the same as in the enhanced world. There's first timers I know for a fact using 2 grams, 3 grams, more than Olympians, and not placing. People, the bigger problem is that people are taking years off their life for not even winning regional shows.
That's actually a great thing to talk about, because I know you mentioned your previous use and you got quite high doses, but didn't see the result that you really wanted. You maybe didn't respond as well as others. Was that hard for you to, like, what was it that allowed you to switch and be like, I'm not just going to keep up in the dose. Let's be rational here. It's not good for my health to keep pushing this. Let's pull back and focus on, I know you say this quite regularly, like, all my clients are bigger than me. Like, I love it when you say it, because I'm just like,
They
it's such
definitely
a
are now.
great humble thing, and like, it's great humility, and also just awareness, self-awareness to be able to do that. And like, yeah, you're not egoistic in that sense. But how was that for you, that transition?
By the time I got to the transition, it was easy, but the process was very difficult, because like I posted on that photo of me and Dorian yesterday, the only thing I ever liked was bodybuilding. It was the only thing I ever liked to do, and I was obsessed with it. It was all that I thought about. First thing when I wake up, last thing I think about before I go to bed. Every waking moment was bodybuilding. And at some point along the way, I realized that I couldn't do it, and I can remember that being so painful for me. When I would watch videos of Dorian or Jay or whatever, Evan Centopani, these guys, the realization that I couldn't look like them really was, it was impossible for me to come to terms with. But what I did know was that I was going to do everything in my power to try to get there, So I did everything I could. I used more and more anabolics over the years, more growth hormone, living like a bodybuilding monk. There was no effort that I didn't make. It just wasn't on the genetic cards for me. And by the time I got to, it was when I turned 30, and I've been married for 5 or 6 years. And you know what happens when a woman turns 30? They start thinking about children. So this was another realization. So I was about 245, 250 pounds at the time, like leaner than I am now. So I was big, I'm like 205 pounds this morning. So about 40 pounds heavier, And it wasn't actually very nice being that big. I had to sleep with a CPAP, lower back pumps everywhere I walked, blah, 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 eating 7,500 calories a day. So it's very time consuming. It was a miserable existence, to be honest, to not actually look like a very good bodybuilder. But, I was the size where you walk around and people would be like looking at you and be like, oh, but, so that was gratifying enough. Anyway, yeah, I got to 30, and when Jazz said about, it's about time we start doing this fertility thing, I was like, oh shit. Went and got a fertility test and it was undetectable. I was like, right, I need to sort this out, which I since have sorted out. So that was the time I said, right, I need to, let's take this as a blessing here. This isn't for me. I'm killing myself, So I just pulled down to TRT, started a fertility protocol, got back into martial arts and lost 40 pounds, and we're all good. I think my biggest fear was that people wouldn't see me as the bodybuilder that would let them coach them anymore.
Yeah.
But nothing changed, because I don't think people care. None of my clients left me. I'm still getting results with my clients. I still give them everything I've got. That's what they want,
Yeah, I think that's so well said. Really, like, I often think about it, like, the best coaches are not the best athletes quite often. In fact, they're the ones often who are similar, like with yourself, who are obsessed with it, try everything they can to get the best from their situation as they can, but it's not good enough.
That's
But
exactly,
that allows them to have, you've now learned how you can help people with a better, like, deck of cards, if you will, play the game and succeed and do it probably healthier, more sustainable, all of those factors. And what you spoke about there is one of the reasons I actually love natural bodybuilding, because I'm like, I can dedicate my life to bodybuilding without the anabolics and do it like it can be like pretty much just health promoting. There's no downside. So even if I'm not a particularly good bodybuilder, then it's like, well, at least I still love this thing and I can still put my effort towards it and I haven't got the downsides. Whereas, yeah, when it's a tough one, but you don't know, right, when you start anabolics, how you're going to respond, how much you enjoy it. And
but what I can say is it's not gonna do anything good for you. That's the very difficult thing. We always say there's no safe, but there's safer. But it's a cost. It's not even necessarily a risk. It's just a straight cost. If you're going to be heavy and exposing yourself to super physiological levels of androgens and GH and whatnot, it's not about it might harm your health. It's definitely harming your health, probably to quite a significant degree. We can mitigate that the best we can and hope for the best, really.
Do you find most people you work with, or it might be people you work with and then just the general pop who are maybe taking, do they think it through sufficiently?
No. And I understand because I've been there. It's normally it's Joe, I don't care. I just want to win. Maybe I'll just give free. This is what they'll always say. Maybe the next 2 years we'll just give it everything. And that 2 years rolls around. Let me just give it one more year. When I turn 30, when I turn 35, I just want to get my Masters Pro card. So when I turn 40, and it never stops. So my job really is to find the middle ground and just pay very close attention to health marker tracking along the way and try to see things before they present themselves. And if it's not on the cards, for somebody being really honest with them, because there are ways to use PEDs, like quote unquote, we'll say responsibly in a super physiological realm. Like, you don't need to blast and cruise like a competitor. Like, when my fertility goals are done, I'm not going to stay at TRT. I'll probably go 300. So TRT, for most people is about 150 milligrams. For me, it's 180 to be kind of upper quartile physiological range. I'll probably double that, and live there for maybe 10 years. Is there a cost? Yeah, but it's quite easy to outweigh that cost with frequent cardiovascular work and very diligent supplementation, specifically things like antioxidants and paying attention to your dietary habits and things like that. You can keep your blood work pretty squeaky clean and keep any cardiac hypertrophy in control and whatnot quite well. But it's when you start creeping out, that inverted U really starts stacking up pretty quickly.
That's really interesting to hear that, obviously you've come down, but you're looking to go back up. And obviously, like you said, you're not going crazy or anywhere near the doses you touched before. But clearly, like, what are you missing out on right now that you're looking forward to going up to a higher dose on? I'm interested to hear.
It's a performance thing more than anything for me now, because I'm a jiu-jitsu guy. Now, I train jiu-jitsu 4 or 5 days a week. And to do long jiu-jitsu sessions and resistance train, I lift in the morning, train jiu-jitsu in the evening. It's very hard to recover from, and I'm rolling with guys that are running 400 milligram, 500 milligram, 600 milligram. You see the difference, man. You feel the difference. I would just like some androgens in the blood. It's entirely selfish, and it's not a smart decision. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. It'd be good for me just to stay at TRT. But my goal set for what gives me meaning and purpose requires super physiological androgens. I'd like to regain some muscle, maybe get to like 215-ish, a little bit leaner, increase my performance, and that's going to require, because like, I'm not gaining any muscle from here. I've been training like 17 years, 10 of them on anabolics. What muscle am I going to gain? So I would just like something to work towards. It's quite hard when you've been stagnant for a long time. Because if somebody's used super physiological PEDs and then they come down to TRT, you're just doing everything you can to hold on to what you got. It's not like, as a natural competitor like yourself, I'm sure you can reasonably try to add 2-3 pounds of stage weight or something each year, something like that. As somebody that's coming down from being enhanced, man, you just like watch it. It was so strange, it was just like watching yourself disappear slowly,
Yeah, I guess that's something I've often thought about is, as a natural, like, I could be at my peak and hold that, I don't know, maybe I'm hoping to like maybe 50 or something. And then it's like sarcopenia just catches up to me too much and I'm going to slowly dwindle. But that peak is, again, like a slow, like the peak isn't that high versus like someone who's assisted's peak, and then their drop is going to be much greater. So I imagine that's something some guys will struggle with. But I can definitely see, I've spoken to people who have gone enhanced, and there is this element of, you said, the energy, like you feel superhuman almost. So I can see it being a bit addictive. And in that sense, do you think it's someone who's on the edge of that, just like, maybe I'll just try it and see how I like it? Do you think that's I don't know,
You
a
don't try
bad
it.
idea? Yeah.
Yeah. So we've spoken about this a lot at Physique Collective. Some people will disagree with me. That's fine. If you're going to start anabolics, it's a lifelong consideration. You will more than likely have to remain at least on TRT for the rest of your life. So if you're going to start injecting anabolic steroids, you will be injecting those for the remainder of your life if you want to do it the healthiest way possible. The other option is that you go on for a course, let's say 8 weeks, 12 weeks, you come off, and then for a period of time, you've got zero testosterone, which is equally as damaging for your health to be hypergonadal. You lose everything that you've worked hard to gain on that. You trudge through that for, 8, 12 weeks, and then you go back on super physiological levels. So you're oscillating between the negative health cost of super physiological levels and the negative health cost of hypergonadal levels. It's an insane way of doing it. Nobody does it like this. We will blast and cruise, you'll oscillate between, or the way that I tend to do things with clients is to like titrate as needed, and then we'll pull down for a period of time, titrate back up, so on and so forth. But you'll be using these things forever. And you might be like me, where you check your fertility and you've got nothing. And then you have to spend thousands. I can't tell you the amount of money I've spent on HCG and HMG in the last year is about $1.5K a month for those medications. That's going to be something you'll have to deal with. So think about freezing some sperm if you're going to go on anabolics as well. It's something you'll have to do for the rest of your life. One thing I will mention is I'm sure there's some naturals, and I respect this, that are really ethically attuned to remaining natural. What I will say is more and more data presented on the dangers of dipping into that lower quartile of the physiological range is being demonstrated over and over again. If you're a man over 35 and you're seeing, or under 35, but generalization, it starts to happen more frequently to guys over 35. If your testosterone is heading south of, 500, 400 nanogram per deciliter, if you're not absolutely needing to be a natural bodybuilder, just get on TRT. The health benefits, the disease risk mitigation, etc., is huge.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I've never really understood the holier than thou natural bodybuilders. I'm just like, hey, again, bit liberal in that sense. Just you do you. Just don't cheat. don't be a liar. So hence our kind of discussion here. But I've also always held to, and I've seen the benefits. Like I was in a very poor testosterone condition, and I needed to go on TRT, and it completely changed my life for the positive in that time course. And I was lucky enough to not need to stay on. My head injury, a very weird thing. I don't know what exactly happened. The doctors can't necessarily explain it, but clearly I was managing to hold low but normal levels of testosterone. But I've always said if I get to that age and I'm trying to do regular blood work like every 6 months for myself to kind of see that, because it's not worth living. One, it's not just my libido's lower, I have lower energy. It's like you just said, and I'm not attuned to that research, but you're just not as healthy if you're that low. So actually you're healthier by having a little bit of testosterone going in.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's a plethora of positive health outcomes for people that can have sort of mid to upper mid-range testosterone. See better insulin sensitivity, reduced inflammation, reduced Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia risk, reduced CVD risk. The list really goes on. You don't want to be, we don't need to live subclinical hormones. Hormonal attenuation is the natural process of dying. You mentioned sarcopenia. That is literally hormone ablation over time is what drives that catabolism and the osteogenic catabolic outcomes. You don't need to live like that now. You can, there's testosterone replacement therapy, growth hormone replacement therapy. There's so many incredible medications available now. Some of the newer generation GLPs are unbelievable for lipid control and appetite control and whatnot. We've got really robust longevity medication that's way more important than bodybuilding stuff,
Yeah. No, yeah. Very, very well said. I think that's where bodybuilding can really burn some people, where they just get so hyper-focused, more commonly taking too much for too long, harming their health. but I imagine there are some natural bodybuilders that are just like, no, I'm never going to go on, and they're equally harming their health in a different way, which is very interesting. I think I know the answer to this question, Joe, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You've probably seen that a number of naturals are going pro within the IFBB. And so that means, in theory, there are naturals who have good enough genetics to outwork, to outwork. I don't know if you can really call it outworking, but they can achieve results better than guys who are on heaps of gear. How realistic is that?
Oh, it's not very realistic, but it does happen. 1 in a billion, potential. It's like Bob Waterhouse. He beat some. Is it Bob Waterhouse? I'm sure he beat some fantastic guys. I was at that show.
I think he went pro as a classic, and then I'm pretty sure he's enhanced now. I can't speak for him, but
yeah, he's definitely.
I assumed based off his physical change.
I mean, I say that I don't know for a fact, but there's an example where you can reasonably assume there's a sufficient amount of lean body mass added. But that's what the kicker will be. I think you can get your pro card, especially if you do enough shows. I don't know how many guys you've like coached or been around in like IFBB. Is like the pro card hunt is so variable. Like you can go to shows that are pro qualifiers where the lineups are insane. Like the standard is unbelievable. And a lot of these guys through a season will do pro qualifier in UK, next week pro qualifier in Poland, next week pro qualifier in Switzerland, and then pro qualifier. They'll just keep going until they get their card. And you'll see the same guys again and again and again. Every now and then you get a show, or I hate to say the lineup is not very good. Now that wasn't the case for Bob Waterhouse, actually. There was a few good guys there. Jimmy Tonk looked really good that day. I think Bob was just so much more classic and he was absolutely skinned. But yeah, you can get a pro card if you go to enough shows. And if you're a really good natural bodybuilder. In classic and men's physique, unlikely and open. But then once you turn pro, you've got no chance. Because you get your pro card and you're back to placing last. It's like you start from go again.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, but it's interesting, the kind of pro card hunt, I've seen that within the IFBB. It's not as common, at least not as far as I've seen within the natural side. It seems to be less common, but the same thing happens. Like it's the same principle. Who turns up on the day, and there are stronger and weaker shows. It's like the WNBF UK is just like notoriously crazy. So it's like you could say the top 3 there could go and do some other European shows, or US, particularly US can often be a bit weaker in terms of lineup, and they'd all go pro. So it's just that's why similarly chasing the pro card, I think it means more in the IFBB than necessarily on the natural side. But
I think it used
to.
It's dwindling a bit now because of things like this. I mean, I know people that have like borrowed money to do like a pro card hunt season. I know people that have used that like Just Giving to fund their pro card hunt. People will bankrupt themselves for the card. And when you get the card, you got to pay for it, and it's just a card. You're essentially renting this piece of card to then just go and compete the same way that you were, but placing dead last again. This makes it sound like I don't like competitive bodybuilding. I love it, but this is the truth. This is the fact of what people are doing. It's absolutely nuts, the amount of money that's being spent to get a card. And it really doesn't mean, I would say this, there's someone watching this going, yeah, you ain't got a pro card. I don't have a pro card. I've coached plenty of people to pro standard though. I think this is another thing is like when it comes to being natty or not, is like, if it's really on the cards for you, you'll know pretty early. So if you're doing this to get a pro card and then be like winning pro shows, like you can see that within a year of training, if it's really for you. Now, if you love doing it and you're passionate about it, have at it. It's what I did for 10 years and I don't regret it really. But if you're doing it, when I'll get a lot of inquiries from young guys that will say like, I really want a pro card, and you'll look and go, there's no chance. And sometimes you'll look and go, yeah, it's for you. Like I've got a couple of young guys now that are like 18, 19. I was like, yeah, man, like you definitely got the potential. Might as well get started now,
Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny because obviously I just turned pro last year, and what you said there, it rings true in terms of, I was like looking at the benefits of the pro card. I was like, I had to like pay for the urine test to like confirm I was natural. Obviously in the WNBF they polygraph, which actually I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on. But then I had to pay for the pro card, and then I have to pay every year to have that pro card, and then I have to pay more to enter pro shows because I guess there's prize money and stuff that you could earn. And I'm like, all of that because I'm never going to be. I loved, and I hate to even say it to myself, but I'm rational enough of a human to know I'm never going to be a top pro within the WNBF. It's just not likely for me. I will try my hardest to be there, but I'm always going to be like bottom of the rank. I'd love to place in a top 5 at like a Worlds and get some top 3s, maybe even win like a random pro show, possibly. I don't know. Like that's me really hoping. But it is exactly as you said. I'm like, man, now I'm bottom of the rung. I could have stayed amateur and maybe battled for some first placings more often, win more. So yeah, it's an interesting one. It's something that's not spoken about. People are just like, oh, the pro card, it's so amazing. But in reality, it just cost me money. It isn't added. Like I'm not making more money through my business or sponsors, or you don't need any of that. What matters more is like your social media presence.
Well, I'd generally issue a warning as well regarding like. So I know you haven't got a lot of time, Steve, so I'll be brief with this one. But I'm sure you've seen, the post-show blues. I think the neurochemistry is pretty similar to like postpartum depression. Where dopamine is so high on the chase. We know that this is like a motivation molecule. And the act of doing the thing is so dopaminergic. The act of prep is so dopaminergic. Seeing yourself getting leaner every day. It's the chase towards something that requires such effort and such dedication. Times that by 10 for people on this pro card hunt, because it's like being on the longest prep ever, doing show after show after show. Eventually you get it and you realize your purpose wasn't on the other side of it, and it's really hard to deal with. That's been my experience for a lot of people.
That makes sense.
I know a lot of people that have got the card and have quit.
Yeah, I'm lucky enough. I never expected it to have got it, and like I was like, oh, it'd be nice to turn pro, but I never expected it. So it was never about the placings for me, which I think has helped me and allowed me to just enjoy the whole thing. Yeah. So I think that's a great warning that you mentioned. Like, and I have the same thing if I have consults with people where they're like, oh yeah, I want to turn pro. I'm really like about let's fall in love with the process. Like we can't control who turns up on the day. The judging, like it could be a different judging panel, could judge you differently. Let's just focus on doing your best job and falling in love with the process. And like what will be. And I mean, that saying comes back to our discussion of genetics, really, of like that's the thing to focus on. You versus you. That's the greatness in bodybuilding, right? Is the self-development that you get.
Oh yeah. The lessons that you can learn along the way, just like any sport that requires a high level of effort, is worth way more than the act of doing it itself. And I wish more people recognize that, the transferable skill. Unfortunately, I didn't learn that until I'd already stopped, but that's absolutely true.
Joe, this might be our last question. We'll see. Would the industry be better off if more enhanced athletes were open about their PED use? I know quite a lot are open about it. Do you think it's a pro, con? What do you see about it?
Definitely a pro. It's definitely a pro. And it's good that more people are. High-level pros on the Olympia stage are talking about their anabolic use now. I mean, most commonly known, John Jewett. John's a good friend of mine, and we've done a lot of things together. And you're looking at a super, super heavyweight who is 100% honest about his use. And it's not low. He's talking about using like 2 grams of testosterone and a gram of Primo or something last off-season. A lot of people look at that and go, fucking hell. But that's what happens, at that level. Similarly, it's like when I went on the RP podcast recently, and there was a few comments on there like, we shouldn't be talking about this, Well, the fact of the matter is I've learned from the amount of emails and things and the amount of posts on Physique Collective is whether I talk about it or not, people are doing it. So we can either talk about it and try to get across the quote unquote safer way of doing it from people that actually do the thing and coach people that actually do the thing, or we can just leave people guessing. That's the option that we have. So the more open we can be, but education focused, the better.
Yeah, I think it makes me think of the situations where you've had with clients where they've been like, I'll do anything to win this. And if you didn't take them on and help them and do it in a safer way, they're just going to go to a coach that's going to be like, yep, sure, we'll do it. And they're not going to care about that person at all. It's kind of similar to that. And I guess there's maybe people listening and seeing it, and the fact we're talking about it, and fundamentally the Revive Stronger is like a natural podcast, and I promote natural bodybuilding. But at the same time, I'm like, if people are going to go there, I want them to find someone like yourself, Joe. And if anyone ever asks me about, I don't know, do you coach enhanced athletes or any of this stuff, I'm just like, go to Physique Collective, go speak to Joe. He is your guy, because I just know you're doing this in a ethical manner in terms of actually taking care of people and not just beating them into the ground with it, and looking for their best interest, not just money for yourself.
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that. Physique Collective's still a passion project. Me and Matt haven't taken a pound out of the account. So we've reinvested every single membership fee back into content, back into getting the app better, back into hiring more staff, blah, blah, blah. You know, I haven't taken a penny, and God, it takes up a lot of our time. When we started Physique Collective, I said I wanted it to be the thing that I needed when I was like 16, 17, when I first started using anabolics. First started looking into using anabolics. I think I was 18, 19. But I couldn't find anything. You know, I was on forums, and I ended up doing like 600 milligram a week with like 30 milligram of D-bol a day. It's a terrible, terrible first cycle, you know. But now we know better. And there was no iPhone or anything back then. You know, I had a Sony Ericsson T something, you know. Yeah, I couldn't use an app to see what was going on. But now, you know, at the click, we've got a 5-minute video that breaks down everything you need to do for your first cycle. Easy. You know, so that's really what we're trying to do.
I mentioned I want to come back to this question, and that's great that you're doing that. And polygraphs. Do you have any thoughts on polygraphs at all? Have you ever looked into them particularly? Just to summarize my thoughts on them, I like them because I just see them as, why not? Like, they're a kind of first line of defense, a deterrent. They're not perfect. Everything has their flaws, right? But I think it just helps deter people who are like umming and ahhing of like, oh, maybe I won't get urine tested, maybe this. Everyone has to have a polygraph, so at least everyone's had some element of testing, whereas a lot of federations poo-poo them because obviously there's a lack of rigor to some extent.
Yeah, I know you said the exact word that came to my head, being a deterrent. I know they're not statistically the most accurate, but even knowing that, would you risk going in there and doing it? You know, I think 90% of humans would be quite scared to go and do it, knowing that they're lying. I would.
I'm scared doing it knowing I'm telling the truth. I'm like, oh,
exactly.
Shit. Like, let's go with false positive here.
Yeah.
So, no, that's cool. That makes sense. Final question, actually. Let's finish with this one, Joe, because I'm interested to know what you might come out with. You may have already touched on it in our discussion already. What's the truth about enhancement that nobody wants to admit, but everyone should hear?
Truth about enhancement that nobody wants to admit.
Feel free to think about it. It's fine.
I think, in my experience of somebody that, you know, I've been coaching and consulting with enhanced guys for literally 10 years this year. And on the Physique Collective forum, thousands of posts, and there's a strong commonality, is that people start using PEDs with a vision of what they're going to look like, what they want to look like. Very rarely does that happen. That's the unfortunate truth with PED use. Now and again, a rare genetic specimen will get to where they want to get to with PEDs. What you tend to see instead is that they start using them. They don't quite get what they want. They use a bit more, don't quite get it. Use some different compounds, maybe start using for longer, maybe increasing the risk. It never really gets to where they want to get to. I suppose that's bodybuilding, really, but just in a much more dangerous sense. It's a never-ending dissatisfaction for the most part.
That's so brutal.
That's why we love it. And that's probably why most, do you know what I'll say? That's probably why most bodybuilders need to practice more mindfulness or something like that. You know, to learn to be okay with not ever getting to the destination and actually seeing the meaning and the passion in the journey is so key. I've got so many clients that love doing this, and they love taking the anabolics, and they love what happens to their physique because they just like doing the thing. You know, they're not too focused on, and funnily enough, they're the people that progress the fastest. I think mostly because their nervous system health is just fantastic, you know, because they're not constantly stressed or overthinking. But, you know, that's a real commonality. Like you said, if you can fall in love with the process, and if PEDs are going to be part of that process, fine. But yeah, unfortunately, I mean, some people would disagree with me, but unfortunately, 95% of PED users are just not, it's not going to get you where in your head you want to go to, you know?
Yeah. So well said. And I think that's part of the reason I never went enhanced, because I was like, I don't think it's going to change like my enjoyment of the process, and it's going to bring with it risks. And I think that is probably true for a lot of people. So well said, Joe. And this has been a great discussion. I definitely want to kind of dig into some more topics with you, because I've been digging into some of your content, Doghouse chats over your way.
Yeah.
I've been enjoying those. So
you'll have to come.
people...
Hey, Steve, you'll have to come for one. If you can travel down my way.
We discussed it before. I definitely have to. I'll be doing it. Yeah, for sure. I'm just in London, so it's we have to arrange it.
About 45 minutes, man. Just swing up here, get a session in, get a podcast in.
Yes, a sauna. I know you got a sauna now, right?
Yeah, we got it all going on here,
I love that. Yeah, I literally was just saying the other day how I want a sauna, and in our house it's like old Victorian.
They're not even too expensive, man. It's I haven't used it much in this weather, but it is really nice to have it in the house. And you build it. I built it myself. I paid someone to come around and put it together. But you do build them yourself. They're like self put together things.
Yeah, I have to see yours and then try and convince my partner that it's something we need. I know I've spoken to Greg Potter about the health benefits of sauna. I'm just like, man, I just want this sauna. And I like them.
The trick, Steve, I didn't ask. It just turned up at the house.
Yeah.
And then it had to go in then, didn't it?
Easier to ask for forgiveness than permission sometimes. I did the same thing during COVID and buying too much gym equipment for our little flat. Far too much. Joe, thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for diving into this topic. I know I kind of threw it a bit of a spanner in the works with it, but I think it was a great chat that people really enjoy. If people want to keep up to date with you, the content you're putting out, Physique Collective, where should they be heading, or coaching as well?
Oh, yeah. So for my stuff and for coaching and for consultations on Instagram at Joe_Physique Collective. For all of the stuff that we do regarding like PED education and bodybuilding education in general, that's Physique Collective, which is at Physique Collective on Instagram, or App Store, Physique Collective, Google Play Store, Physique Collective. It's a subscription app, but it's only $9.99 a month. I think we just hit 300 hours of content on there. We've got 5,000 Q&A responses on the forum. The forum's always popping off every day. You know, for $9.99, it's a steal. And I think that's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joe. I'll make sure that's linked in the description. And guys, we'll catch you next time. Take care.
Thank you, Steve.